I'm going to start on the treadmill first after my injury to get me back running. Now people do this a lot. They obviously get injured and they're a runner and they want to get back to running, and one of the first things they'll do before they go back to real running is they'll run on a treadmill, with the assumption that running on a treadmill is easier on you. And this is an assumption that we make because we just think, oh, you know, shock absorption's less or whatever and all that. But is it true? Do we know actually that this is actually the case, and are we actually creating a problem with certain injuries? So the first thing is, on a treadmill, when we run, we actually have a different angle of how our foot clears the ground and lands. So we basically land with a slightly flatter foot. And I don't mean flat-footedness, I mean the angulation of the angle towards the floor. So the angle of your foot coming down to the floor is actually flatter. Yeah, so it's not as upwards. So your toes are slightly lower to the ground. And this obviously has an implication with regards to if you ran like that a lot and then you ran for real, you're probably more likely to catch your toes and things because you haven't got this undulation of surface to account for. So on a treadmill, you can be almost not picking your knees up as much and coming through, and the angle's different. Also, the load is shifted a lot more down to the plantar flexors. So your calf muscles basically are under more load on a treadmill. And this is because the runner's weight is shifted forwards on heel strike or on foot strike. And this is also why we know that the Achilles peak force is higher in treadmill running. There is an actual greater Achilles load when you run on a treadmill compared to real running. But tibial bone, so the shin bone strain load is less on a treadmill compared to real running. So runners on treadmills would be less likely to overload the bone. But obviously bone is adaptable, so therefore, the bone itself won't necessarily be strong or stronger and strengthened as much as real running would do that. So this shows there is definite differences running on a treadmill to real running. And it depends on the injury. So if you've got a calf injury, you've got a tendinopathy of the Achilles, or a tendinopathy of one of the sort of more the plantar flexing type structures, then you are going to actually place more load on them structures when you come to treadmill running than real running. So actually it would be the wrong approach potentially. Now, the other thing is, if you were doing that style of running a lot as well, then you might create deficiencies in your technique, which don't translate as well across to the real running. But obviously, if you want to look at the load itself through the bones, through the joints, then it looks like then treadmill running is less load on them things. So if you're getting over a tibial stress fracture as a prime example, especially based on this data here, then treadmill running would be earlier in the progression towards real running later. Whereas if you had an Achilles problem, you could even interpret it the other way around, and therefore you'd want to do overground real running before you got to treadmill running. But usually most people who are runners, treadmill running is more if you're a fair weather runner and you don't want to run in the rain, cold and wet or whatever. So there still is the reason to do that, but it's not this assumption that was made at the beginning that, treadmill running is just lower load on you. It's not as simple as just saying that. It's lower load on the bones and the load through the joints and that type of thing, but it does have a technique difference, and it does put more load on your Achilles and your calf muscles. So this is something that you should be aware of with the type of injury you've got and how you go about phasing that approach back into running. But it was really interesting to delve into the research on this because people always make this assumption, and it's not always completely accurate to say that treadmill running is easier than real running on your injuries or recovery from your injuries. So anyway, that's it for this video, and I'll see you next time.
Perfect.